They called him the weakest hunter alive, and honestly, Sung Jinwoo couldn't argue with that assessment. Standing in the hospital hallway, clutching discharge papers with hands that still trembled from his latest near-death experience, he stared at his reflection in the window. Bruised face, hollow eyes, the kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. Jinwoo was stuck at the bottom. E rank, the lowest possible classification. Weaker than a high school athlete, slower than his own sister, and about as useful in a dungeon as a wet paper bag. 3 months recovering from injuries that should have killed him, and for what? To go back into another dungeon and barely survive again? The irony was crushing. In a world where magical gates spawned monsters that could level entire cities, where S-rank hunters were treated like celebrities and commanded armies. But something had changed in that double dungeon. Something the other survivors didn't know about. He pulled up his status window, the blue translucent screen that only he could see floating in front of his face. Systems like this existed in video games, not real life, not in his life, anyway, where it used to show pathetic stats across the board. Now there was something different. No, it was what happened when he tried to skip the running portion. A system message appeared. Welcome to the penalty zone. Survive for 1 hour to return. They moved with intelligence, coordination, and a hunger that made his skin crawl. For 60 minutes, Jinwoo ran, hid, and fought with a desperation he'd never experienced before. When he finally collapsed back in his apartment, covered in sweat and phantom wounds, he understood one thing perfectly. At exactly midnight, when the quest timer ran out, the world around him dissolved. Something impossible. A quest notification blinked in the corner, and beneath it, words that made his blood run cold. Daily quest preparation for the penalty zone. The moment when he realized the system had been preparing him for exactly this situation. All those penalty zones, all those impossible survival scenarios, had been training, and now, for the first time in his life, he was the strongest person in the room. What the hell was a penalty zone? The quest details were simple enough. Faster than should be possible, hitting harder than his frame suggested, fighting with a tactical awareness that seemed to predict the boss's every move. In less than 3 minutes, he'd single-handedly eliminated a threat that had nearly wiped out an entire experienced raid team. Jinwoo realized something that chilled him to the bone, not just mentally, though the discipline was changing him in ways he hadn't expected. Something that made his heart race with possibilities he'd never dared imagine. His actual stats were increasing: strength, agility, intelligence, vitality. Numbers that had been locked in place for years were finally moving upward. 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and a 10-kilometer run. Jinwoo was starting to suspect the answer to that question might be something the world wasn't ready to hear. His first shadow soldier, the beginning of an army that would eventually shake the foundations of the hunter world. He underestimated the dungeon boss's attack patterns, and suddenly the entire raid was in chaos. Real hunters, people with actual skills and equipment, were getting torn apart by a creature that shouldn't have been that strong. What are you? For the first time in his life, he was the one with power, real power, the kind that could reshape the world or destroy it, depending on how he chose to use it. They'd brought him along as a pack mule, nothing more. Jinwoo was used to it by now, following behind the real hunters while they cleared monsters, picking up the magic stones they left behind. Failure to complete the daily quest within the time limit would result in appropriate penalties. The system didn't elaborate on what those penalties might be, but Jinwoo had a feeling he didn't want to find out. Still, after years of being the joke of the Hunter Association, after watching stronger hunters look through him like he didn't exist, the idea of having his own personal leveling system felt like a cruel joke. He decided to test it. The first day nearly killed him, not the exercises themselves, though those were brutal enough for someone in his condition. He found himself standing in what looked like an ancient coliseum, surrounded by towering stone walls and the sound of something massive moving in the shadows. The creatures that emerged from the darkness were like the goblins and wolves faced in regular dungeons. The system wasn't playing games. Over the following weeks, something incredible started happening. The daily quests were making him stronger, but the real breakthrough came during a routine C-rank dungeon raid with the White Tiger Guild. Everything changed when they encountered the boss. The guild leader, a cocky B rank who'd been treating Jinwoo like furniture all day, made a critical error in judgment. Jinwoo watched it happen like everything was moving in slow motion. What happened next would haunt the surviving guild members for the rest of their lives. Jinwoo moved like a different person entirely. The system rewarded him immediately. Level up notifications cascaded across his vision, along with something new. You have unlocked the job class Necromancer. You may now extract shadows from defeated enemies. Standing over the boss's corpse, Jinwoo extended his hand and spoke words that came from somewhere deep in his subconscious. Arise. The shadow that peeled away from the dead monster and knelt before him looked identical to the creature they just fought, except now its eyes glowed with loyal devotion instead of mindless hunger. But as he looked around at the surviving guild members, all staring at him with expressions of shock and growing fear, the system hadn't just been making him stronger, it had been changing him into something else entirely, something that might not be human anymore. The guild leader, blood running down his face from where the boss had nearly killed him, stammered out a question that would follow Jinwoo for the rest of his journey. What? Jinwoo looked down at his shadow soldier, then back at the humans who'd spent years treating him like he was invisible. I'm still figuring that out, he said quietly, and dismissed his shadow with a thought. But privately as he walked out of that dungeon knowing he'd never be the same person who entered it, the weakest hunter alive was dead. What emerged from that dungeon was something entirely new, something the ranking system had no category for. And this was just the beginning.